not cynical and opportunistic about the recent bid for asylum by Sri Lankan nationals, including Tamils, when in fact, of course, there's nothing particularly fresh or distinctive about the core elements of their claims. Quite to the contrary, the contours of the fears, the contours of the conflict, and the contours of the brutality which prompted the decision of so many to flee from their homeland are strikingly similar and in fact are in many cases rooted in those elements which pushed people from Sri Lanka in search of safety in the last 2 decades. Let me offer you briefly just a rare glimpse perhaps into a legal submission prepared for a Tamil client seeking refugee status whose identity of course remains confidential. I quote this submission, just an extract from the submission reads, "The applicant fears that if he is returned to Sri Lanka, he will suffer persecution and or substantial discrimination amounting to a gross violation of human rights in the form of arbitrary arrest and detention, imprisonment, physical assault, torture and possible execution at the hands of the Sri Lankan authorities in the form of principally the Sri Lankan army on account of," and there are three limbs to this, on account of, 1, his actual or imputed political opinion in support of the LTTE for independence from Sri Lanka to the LTTE-controlled parts of the country, and of equal and just treatment of ethnic Tamils by the Sri Lankan authorities, and against the activities of the Sri Lankan authorities, and the systematically brutal treatment of ethnic Tamils in particular, or as an imputed deserter, traitor, or opponent of the LTTE and Sri Lankan government collaborator. Secondly, purely by reason of his Tamil ethnicity. And thirdly, his membership of a particular social group comprising young Tamil males. The applicant also fears serious harm at the hands of various non-state Asian militia backed by the Sri Lankan government and operating with impunity throughout Sri Lanka on account of his political and ethnic profile referred to above. He also fears that he will suffer persecution in the form of forced conscription, or, if he refuses to be conscripted, arbitrary arrest and detention, imprisonment, physical assault, torture and possible execution at the hands of the LTTE as a result of his Tamil ethnicity and his membership of a particular social group comprising young, single and or able-bodied Tamil males. He will not be provided with any protection from either the pro-Sri Lankan government militias nor the LTTE by the Sri Lankan security forces on account of the profile I just mentioned. The applicant will thus be discriminatorily denied effective state protection. Now, this submission was prepared in mid-2007, but I think would describe some, if not many, of the core elements of many Tamil refugee claimants now. I don't want to oversimplify matters here. I'm not suggesting that the situation for Tamils or other groups in Sri Lanka has remained static, or that the civil war and its aftermath have had no effect on their situation. But what I am saying is this, that the common dark thread in all cases is the real prospect of the person facing persecution in their homeland, a common fear of brutality. As the politics of asylum is resurrected inexorably with the recent increase in boat arrivals, it's critical, I think, that there be a proper understanding of what the law requires in relation to refugee status. That is the test that is used to examine the claims for refugee protection. But the fact is that only certain types of claims fit the narrow, stringent legal requirements to qualify a person for protection in Australia as a refugee. The same applies whether the person is a Tamil asylum seeker, an Afghan asylum seeker, a Sinhalese asylum seeker. The same test, of course, applies. This test, derived from the United Nations Refugees Convention, requires that the person have a well-founded fear of being persecuted in their homeland. The fear must have a basis in objective evidence. That evidence must reveal a real, not remote, risk of future harm, and the targeting of the person must be motivated by a specific civil or political reason, namely because of the person's race, religion, political beliefs, social group or nationality. In this context, it's important to address, I think, a long-standing myth about refugees which has recently crept back in recast form into the political discourse in this country. And I raise it in particular because many Sri Lankan asylum seekers, including Tamils, have borne the brunt of this myth heavily. This myth goes something like this. The only genuine refugees are frail, dishevelled, destitute, and generally emanate from the squalor of refugee camps. Some of the more extreme extensions of this myth peddled recently envisage that genuine refugees don't dress well, have financial means, listen to iPods, or even take multivitamins. And that evidence of such attributes is somehow a telltale sign that the asylum seekers are probably cynical, fraudulent, economic opportunists unworthy of our protection. The fact is that the Refugees Convention is essentially egalitarian. Refugee protection is not about class, and nowhere in the treaty is there any mention of a financial means test. There's a good reason for this. The focus is on whether the person will suffer serious harm, not their relative wealth. Another myth, just permit me for a moment to refer to another myth in passing, which again Tamil asylum seekers have borne the brunt of, I think, and that myth, which has found its way back into the political discourse recently, is the one in which there's a bizarre entanglement of terrorism with those who in fact are fleeing from acts of gross inhumanity. Needless to say that the myth comes unaccompanied by facts to support it, and I would join Jake in referring to the fact that that not only are no other people more closely and carefully scrutinised in relation to security issues than asylum seekers that come by boat, but that none, to my knowledge, have been found under stringent testing to be a security risk. I turn now to the second issue of my presentation. That's how do we treat and examine protection claims of spontaneous asylum seeker arrivals. And unfortunately, this area remains one that is, in Australia, that is mired in policy contortions. There are two regimes for the same task, essentially. In practice, the relevant regime depends on where you land in Australia still. Under one system, the one for people who arrive on the mainland, not those who arrive by boat generally, but those who arrive on the mainland, there's an ordinary legal process for people to present their case for refugee protection. A government official from the Department of Immigration makes an assessment of the case and a decision about whether the person meets the definition of a refugee. If they're refused, they can go to a tribunal or court. And due to recent detention reform, most people undergo that process in the community, not in detention. Under the other system, which I guess we're most familiar with at the moment, that is with people arriving by boat in excised territory, claims for refugee protection are assessed under an inferior non-legal process by government officials with none of the basic safeguards of the rule of law, including the legal guarantee of a protection visa if someone is recognised as a refugee. So under this process, even if a person is recognised as a refugee, their fate is still dependent on ministerial discretion. A visa to remain in Australia, free from the prospect of persecution, is dependent upon the personal whim of the Immigration Minister. That's the regime that applies to most people who come by boat to Australia at the moment, including Tamils. The policy thus contains a deliberately discriminatory set of rules about the key question, and that is someone a refugee and deserving of our protection? Part of the current narrative in the public discourse is the question, are we a soft touch? And I could probably add that to that phrase to the echo chamber that Jake referred to. Are we a soft touch? I can assure you that it's a bold heading on every media producer's question card. Are we a soft touch? I've lost count of the amount of times I've been asked this. My answer is yes. The key question, the key reason why we're seeing people come in increasing, but albeit small numbers, including increased numbers of Tamils, is because of the conditions in countries such as Sri Lanka. It's what we call in the refugee area a push factor. But we need to put all this in perspective. The increase here in Australia is in line with an increase in numbers of asylum seekers worldwide. It's a global phenomenon. No matter how much hype is created, we're not about to be swamped. The numbers here remain minuscule in comparison with other countries. And in the last 2 decades, just as an example, in the last 2